happens. Aha. And all the stuff says that we are live and we're having a fantastic day. And then, of course, Mr. Heller here is off playing hooky today. He was supposed to be with us, and I want to say Penguin Random House. He's at one of those big publishing companies doing some book. Him and I think
Mhm.
Paul Rubin is also directing there. Anyway, I don't know. Listen, these guys, they get called and they go in, and for some reason, he chooses work over hanging out with me. And I know, yeah, Maria, can you believe that? And my guest today is one of my favorite people in the whole world, Maria McCann. And she's just so, first off, I got to brag on her because she's too humble. First, we both lived here in Southern California. She's lived here her whole life. So now 25, 28 years, I think, for you. And I've been here 40 years. And we're about 15 minutes apart. She lives in Burbank, California now. But if you go to her IMDb, you'll be just blown away at how long it is. And it goes back a few minutes. She was doing shows 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and she can tell us some of her origin story with acting. It's just pretty wild. And then just last week, we got to spend some time together. And where were we at, Maria?
The Neener. No,
Neener.
New England, Narrators Retreat 2024. I didn't know the lingo, but this year I'm like, "Oh, it's Neener."
Yeah.
So, there you go.
Okay. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about acting. We're going to talk about a little bit about the little backstory here. And Maria is one of the most underrated coaches out here in the world that I think she's a hidden gem. And it's this that long before audiobooks, she has been working with people here in Hollywood, helping them get gigs for TV shows and movies and streaming things and has been doing that forever, doing crazy things like what these actors do in Southern California and actually all over the world. But one of the things that they do here is the smart ones know they need a lot of reps and they need to be good at their craft. And so what do? They have this little coffee club, and rather than going and playing Jenga or cards or something that used to happen back in the old days, they would get together and do this cool thing called, best I know, correct me if I'm wrong, a table read. Is that
Mm.
close? And
Oh, you're talking about the writers group that I was a part of with
yeah,
all the Emmy winners? Yeah,
yes.
that kind of fed into the yeah, we actually had a winner of, Breaking Bad, she was a writer for that, but yeah, they would for 10 years, I went to a group where writers would bring their scripts, and then that was the first time they'd be like, "You're playing the old man, the five-year-old girl, and and the lead." So,
Right.
it was a good, like, practice run for doing audiobook narration because you got to play all the parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a group of actors would get together and they would get
Group
a
of
script
writers.
with writers,
Writers.
but you
It
would
was the
have some.
writers so they could hear their scripts and be like, "Oh my god, that sounds terrible," and then a few actors acting our heinies off just so they could really hear how it would sound when
Okay,
it was
and to
being
get a feel
filmed.
for it, yeah.
Yeah,
But what that does is now how many years did you do that?
10.
10 years, okay,
Yeah.
and it was an average of once a week?
That was once a week, that was an actual group. It's still here in Los Angeles.
Cool, cool,
It's
cool.
called Group 26 if anybody's
Okay.
interested. I think it's
But,
20 spelled out in 6, the number.
artists are like this across almost every performance genre. You learn as a young musician, actor, sculptor, whatever, pick your art. And an Olympic athlete, you never arrive. And one of the reasons that Maria would waste a day of an evening once a week going to these table reads and practicing is it allowed her to improve her craft. It allowed her to get into situations that on her own she wouldn't get into because she'd go to this and they hand her a script that night. She has to act that out to the absolute best she can based on the script because these writers wanted to hear what they're writing. How did it sound when they have actual people doing it, actors doing it? And so this is the same thing that happens across every art where the people that get really good at it get a crazy number of reps and find ways to improve their craft constantly. And then it leads to, how she got into this business and it gives her some insights in terms of how many rehearsals did you have before you go live with your table reads?
None. You have to be ready to go, and that's the thing too. I've been coaching acting for decades, and all acting is somewhat the same, but it's just to narration coaching that I'm finally stretching my wings, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and,
And
let's see.
there's not a week that's gone by I haven't acted in some way, in some manner, usually every day, either coaching other people or doing some acting myself. Um, so never fear when people now are new in this, they're like, "Wow, I'm not getting it," or whatever, and it's like, well, you do kinda need the coaching. It's hubris to think that you're gonna be okay without it, and one of my favorite things at Neener was when Paul Allen Rubin said I was just talking to my daughter about it today, Michael Phelps had a coach.
Right,
Simone Biles had a coach. So it's not about how talented you are.
right,
That's not the point. It's we can't see or hear ourselves in
right.
space, so we need somebody to kinda guide us
Uh,
sometimes.
Olympic athletes, but world-class professionals, Kobe Bryant for all the basketball fans and Michael Jordan prior, and I read the books by their coaches. They had a pri not only did the team have coaches and strength coaches, and so every team that these world-class athletes were on, in a team situation, they had a coaches for the team. This guy or gals coaches offense or defense, but all of them had their own private coach in addition, and maybe their own private nutrition coach. But that was, a different thing. And it's just if the more you read about high performance people, the more you find out that almost all of them have somebody that they rely on to give them unfiltered and sometimes brutally honest advice about how they're doing. And, you've been doing that for so long. I don't think anybody who's an actor or an artist, a performer, really ever gets away from doing that. Even I always get blown away. So do you find the same thing? What's your
Yeah, and
experience
I
with
was
these
just,
other good actors?
I get the same notes in some ways. So I had at the retreat, Carol Monda and Joanna Perrin were coaching me. And golly, I still have the same issues, which is my pacing slowing down. And it's kind of I think women deal with this more than men. It's being brave enough to take up room and space and own what you're doing. And then I think Joel's was like, be bigger, take more chances. Because when you're a big personality, like I happen to be, it's always like, oh, I want to play small, I want to play safe. So that's lovely to have a coach that I trust, like Joel go, "No, more, more, more." And it's like, "More? More me?" But, so yeah, that's getting eyes on it is important.
Yeah, and the great coaches also want you to go beyond our comfort zone
Mhm.
and go out there because there for those of you that are getting coaching, one of the things you'll get is like, why does that coach want me to go that big? That doesn't make any sense. That's too big. Every coach that's been around for a little while knows this thing called the snapback principle, where if you take a rubber band and you stretch it a whole lot, when you let go, it comes back. If you want the whole thing to be a little longer when it's not stretched, you actually have to stretch it a little further. And then, so when someone learns a new skill, if they only do it up to the point you want, later when they're on their own, when they're back to do something, they will actually do it less. So all your coaches were trying to get you to go bigger, 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 knowing in the real world, when you're in your own booth, you will probably move back a little bit. So you got to practice it even bigger than what you want to be. And then most people will snap a little back toward where they were before they got the coaching.
Yeah, I also liken it to, I always say when you're really doing some great work, it feels like your toes are on the precipice of a cliff. And great acting is often just throwing yourself off of it and trusting. So when we as actors try and hold on to the words and trying to like control the characters and everything, it's actually not as free or as real as it is when you just give in to the process. So that's part of that being big too, I think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So, any interesting takeaways that you found at the conference last week at Neener?
So many. Yeah. I mean, it's great that Johnny creates such a loving, friendly, positive environment. It's safe, and we take over a whole it's like a retreat place. So everything is there, and it's 3 days. So one of the things that I like to talk about networking is it's very organic. So we had 4 people there who can cast an audiobook narrator in a book. And instead of like APAC feeling like you gotta go up, "Hi, how are you?" You can wait till you happen to sit together at breakfast or sit together at lunch or, you're singing crazy karaoke. So they get to really see you and get to know you. And in my case, what was great is last year, I'm a big personality, I'm a loving personality, but I don't like to sometimes network, in a very forward way. So last year I got to know Rin Kraus at Spotify, but this year we sat together and then, it's just so much deeper
Yeah.
because they're shy too.
Yeah.
They're shy people. So it takes them a little while to kinda get to know you and get to know your rhythms. So
Well,
that's one of the things I really cherish because from the reach outs we're supposed to do, "Dear so and so, here's what's going on with me, blah, blah, blah." It's really hard to get that organic, um, connection. And
connection.
then I wanted to say one other thing about networking because 'cause you're like, "Marie McCann, what a networker," and I was thinking about it. All of us need to know that networking is about listening. A lot of it is listening. So, learning about the producers, that you're writing to, listening to interviews they've given, and in these opportunities, asking and getting to know what their interests are. Then it naturally kind of goes into, you'll have opportunities to talk about yourself and what you're doing. So, I think sometimes we feel this pressure to be like the shiny toy, the fascinating person, and really, I think it's more about listening and being yourself.
Isn't acting kind of reacting?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
But and so just for context, so Maria, when she started this, knew nobody in the narration business, and today, um, she'll send me a message. Hey, I'm going to this. I'm going. Sometimes just going to a house party in LA. Every once in a while, there'll be a group of narrators that get together, and somebody has a little party or a little get together, and she's hosted them
Yeah,
and others have hosted them around LA. And sometimes because LA is so massive, I mean, we may have to drive an hour to get to something or whatever. And you know what? She shows up at all these different places. And I thought I was good at this stuff before I met her. And then it's like, okay, I got a lot to learn and I have to do more of it. And it's one of those cool things. She shows up, and today I don't know many people that know as many, like, and not only know, but you can constantly refine the relationships, like listening to what they like and getting to know them and being patient so that catch that phrase she said. Year number 1 when she met Ren, she thought, cool, I know her. And then deepens the whole thing this year because hey, now there's an opportunity to interact and do it again. And it's those second and third and fourth times that where it changes the relationship. And now if there was a book that was going to Spotify and Maria happens to contact Ren at that time because Maria knows the book's coming out or whatever, that's a whole different relationship than I have with some of those publishers where I've met them maybe once. And frankly, the worst thing is they're not going to remember me and they
yeah,
can't.
talking to my managers on camera is where I learned this. I would go do a workshop and I'd be like, "Oh my god, I was so good." So I would call my managers and be like, "You need to get in touch with so and so casting director." And they'd say, "Would they recognize you in a grocery store?" I was like,
Oh,
"What? What?" Would they say, "Hi, Maria, how you doing?" And they were saying, "We don't wanna call," and they don't really remember you or know you. And I think it does take many times over. Think about the casting people you've met in audiobooks, some of you. Do you remember their face? Do you remember where they're from? Like, there is an onus on both sides to
yeah.
get to know people, and I think the more you're exposed, the better.
Well, at the retreat, there were some 4 reps from different publishers, major publishers. One of them was brand new to me this year. We did talk. Odds of her remembering, though, she also talked to, uh, 80 other people, and we had a conversation that was less than 5 minutes. It might have been 3 minutes, and it's just we were talking, and we were on the way to something, and I just know if I don't do some sort of reach out, some sort of situation where my name comes up again, she's not gonna remember me. She just met
Was
80
it Gene
people.
I we Johnny does a beautiful job curating it too, because he brings Eric Black back, year after year because he also gives people their first books, and he lets once he knows you, you get into the portal, and Rin's 2nd year or whatever, but then he had Esther
Right.
de Araujo,
She was
I think
new.
that's how she says it, from Macmillan, and then Gina White from Podium.
Okay.
So, again, with I never connected enough with Esther to sit with her and talk
Right.
to her, but I went up and there was a question when you interviewed me, a couple years ago when I started about getting into the Big 5,
Right.
and I thought, like, "Oh, I hope it's soon." It's taken about 2 years for me to really, like, so going up to Esther and just saying, "Hi, I did my first Macmillan book," and she was like, "Oh, I listened to the sample. That was a beautiful," so
Oh,
we had like a 5-minute conversation, but
right.
it's the face to the work,
Right.
and that's it. Sometimes and I've seen it with Eric, he doesn't necessarily hang out with a certain narrator, but then they get an offer for a book
Right.
or an opportunity for an audition. So it's just about really organically being yourself, I think.
And but it's also having the multiple exposures to people that also that's just beautiful with Esther. Since she kind of knew about you, but had never met you. And now you get that 1 plus 1 equals about 16 in this case because she had heard your sample, but had no face. No, I mean, she might have known your name, but you know what? The odds of her, I don't want to say, she might have remembered your name. Okay. But she hears samples from, 100 books over a 6-month period or more. And she hears all this stuff. And then to keep it all together, I have this terrible thing that I've done a Zoom call with somebody one time, and I didn't talk to him for 6 months. And then I ran into him in person. And it's like, well, they look different than they did on Zoom. And then furthermore, we had one conversation. It was an hour. I did not remember it until
Yeah.
something came up in our conversation because I might have talked to 350 people in the interim. And that was just, I don't even remember why we connected the first time, whatever. It's just that those publishers, how many people do you think they meet in a month that are trying to get their attention to get a job?
I mean, and the thing is, unlike on camera, it's the Wild West out there. And what I mean is there's some portals or whatever, but a lot of it, I had got a book once just early on, which I thought I was doing for Dion, but I was doing for Simon and Schuster. That shows how new I was. But I just happened to send the reach out on the day that they were looking for a Laura Linney type voice and the casting person. So I think I'm still struggling, and I work with my accountability partner about, "Oh god, I don't wanna do this reach out and bothering people," but they expect it from us. It's the way the business works, and you've gotta keep your face in there.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be like, "Oh my god, I just sent them something," and I'll look and I'll be like, "That was 7 months ago. Oh, darn it." So, it's about consistency. Tim Lunabus is the king of consistency, and his career has taken off,
Yeah.
because of that grit, if you will.
Well, and Keith Brown said, 100% it's about the follow-up. And Keith, by the way, that was a riot having you there at the conference. Um,
Amazing
you know,
actor, and amazing singer as well,
yeah,
but yeah.
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 Well, and here's the weird thing. So Keith's a great singer, and if you haven't heard him sing, you got to check this guy
Opera,
out. Yeah, yeah.
opera,
This
doesn't
this
mess
is
around.
he's a serious singer. He's a real singer. Okay,
Yeah.
one of those real singer types. Anyway, the thing that's interesting about it is that when you know something else about somebody, then that's a totally different level than when you just heard, oh, Keith narrated a book. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's good. We all have done that. But that's
And
not the same as if you know a little bit about their backstory and their personality and the connection there. And so, yeah.
and Keith is particularly kind of warm and,
Yep.
like, inviting, so it's a good thing for him. I wanna take a right turn
Go
because
for
you
it.
asked me about takeaways too. I thought that one of the most fascinating takeaways, and I don't even know if we should share the trade secret because it was such a good one, was, Esther talking about, um how do you like, send them something when you know what's coming down the pike? So, if you know Macmillan is doing this book and it's a book on chronic pain, and you're somebody that suffers from chronic pain, then you write them and you say this, or there's an author that you're passionate about. And it was like, well, how do you find that? Well,
Right.
there's a way in Audible to sort by publisher. And I didn't really know that. And then you sort by date. So I'm hoping I'm going to start to use that because recently I was looking at my Audible like I do. I like to look at my reviews and hang around. And I was like, why didn't I get asked to do the 3rd book of this series? I was like, "I wonder if they got another narrator." Always really positive thinking about myself. So I clicked on I clicked on it just to see whether they got another narrator and saw that Dreamscape has bought the rights for this author, and they hadn't cast her next book, which is a new series. So it's one of those things where it's like you use that information and get in touch with those contacts and you say, "I have a relationship with this author," or whatever. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and what I was blown away, the same thing was there are a bunch of books that the major publishers are working on, and because they put out pre-publicity, we as narrators can know that there's a book out there that's uncast. And all the publishers are all different. Some of them are working and they're going to cast somebody in the next 2 weeks. And they already have their list, and they're going to pick from their people that they know or people they find, and then they're going to get auditions out to them. Then there's a couple of publishers that are casting 6 months out, and they have a book that's not coming out for 6 months, so they're looking for the right people. And you can find out that they have books that they haven't cast. And if you were right for it, then of course it would make sense to get in touch with them and say, "Hey, I see you're doing a book on coloring your hair when you're fully Santa Claus white." I go, "Well, I relate to that. I'd be good. I know."
Nailed it.
Yeah, I by the way, if anyone ever, I am just Santa Claus, Snow White. My grandfather at 35 was 100% white, and I put a little color, and I don't care because I'm like, what do I care? Anyway, so if they had a book on should men color their hair, I'd go, wow, that's uncast. I know a lot about that. I could be authentic.
Yes.
Authentic because I'm changing myself to look different. I don't know if that seems like an oxymoron to me. And anyway, the people that were there gave us some insights into how to find books that are uncast. And so it was way more than what we're talking about here, meaning she said, okay, go look at here on Audible, go look here. And we all, if we're going after these authors, because here's an interesting fact that most of you know already, authors are starting to have a lot more power in who's
Lot of power,
cast
yeah.
than they ever did in the past. So a lot of times they have final say. Now, many of them are smart enough to go with whatever the publisher recommends. But if you ever can get an author who goes, it goes to the publisher, you guys have, we wanted this a collaboration, but I love Maria. I've had an I've seen her stuff, heard her previous stuff. Can we get her into the audition process as well? Then of course the publishers these days, and even Heller, he'll admit he has to audition for a bunch of books where you go back 3 years ago before the pandemic. I don't want to say they were just handing him books, but
Oh, yeah, they
it,
were.
but it really comes down to, and the same for him and a set of people that have been doing this a while. If the publisher knew that they were competent, they have a great work ethic, they do a great job voicing, they're great narrators, then they would go, well, I'm not going to audition Don when, we know four others that have already worked with us and done 20 to 400 books with us. Let's just go ahead and tell the author, yeah, this would be a good fit. We got this handled. Now it's a collaboration.
I think it's been frustrating. I heard Grover Gardner in an interview. He's at Blackstone, and he's also an award-winning narrator. And I do think it makes their process more difficult and longer. Just to back you up on the Macmillan is like 6 months ahead. Dreamscape's 2-3 weeks.
Right.
So it also depends. But authors. I'm married to a writer. They a director, actor, writer, whatever, but they hear voices often in their head. So, and that's a way I think also to take pressure off ourselves with these auditions. I think sometimes when we audition, we're like, "I'm really talented. I was super good. Why didn't I get
Why didn't
this?"
get
At least I say that.
it?
And
We all do.
and I think it's one of those things where it's just not the voice that they heard in their head for whatever reason.
I always joke
So,
and think that I would never get cast if I sounded like the author's ex. It wouldn't matter how good I voiced something. If I were sounded like somebody that they dated younger in life and they hated that guy, then I am not going to get the job, even if I were the right, even if I'd done a great job with the audition. Sometimes I'm the wrong voice for that, and there's just nothing you can do about that except for. So you usually like put out what, one audition every 3 to 6 weeks?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's embarrassing how much I auditioned, from the Dreamscape portal. Yeah, I'm constantly auditioning, and that was actually a good tip you gave me early on, because I started on the route with, did royalty share, then did, per finished hour, and then working more with the mid-size Podium and Dreamscape and whatever. This is the drum I beat. We as our job as audiobook narrators is truly the auditioning. And the way to stay sane in this business is by making each audition your piece of art. Like as most you as you can be. And then you do it and you bless it and you put it out in the universe and you got to move on to the next one. But the more you're auditioning, yeah, I typically audition between PFH or Ahab or Dreamscape 3 times a day, maybe, I tend to do.
Yeah, yeah. And how
Um,
long you been? But you've only been doing that the last 3 weeks. Is that correct?
no, from the very
So it's
beginning.
2 years. Here's the thing. Over a couple years, this gal has been averaging 3 auditions a day. I mean, could you average that 3 a day? Is that accurate?
That I could
Yeah.
I handle 3 a day?
No,
Yeah.
that you're doing 10 plus a week, correct? Over the
Yes.
last 2 years.
Yes.
Okay. And so anybody out there who's auditioning less than, an average of one per day, you're competing against somebody who is serious about auditioning. And in her I remember the first 3 months, you did 13 books. And then over the first year, she had 47 books. In the first couple years, she's like, with all the stuff that isn't even out yet, but is done in the can. I think you're closing in on 100 books.
On 100.
Okay.
Yeah. My daughter's like, "We're taking you out to dinner when you get to 100." Yeah, I have about 6 that I need to book to get to 100, so
Okay.
any producers out there can get it. Hey, Melissa had a great question. Can you
Yeah.
read her question, please?
Sure. Um, Melissa Benson, who's killer, 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 killer. I had nothing. That's the way I talk, by the way. I like the way you wrote that. I had nothing for weeks, and suddenly I got about 8 book series with Tantor, and I'm booked through March. By the way, Heller doesn't like you to say that you're booked through March. Take that down, because what he wants is what if somebody's noticing and says, "Oh no, well I'm not even going to think of Melissa because she's booked through March." Anyway, so I've been doing regular reach outs and I don't want to stop now, but now I'm not available. And she went on to the next one because she ran out of space there for several months. Should I keep up with my emails?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and even talking to somebody like Andy Arndt, you know, try and get ahead of your schedule, and especially I would do reach outs, continue with, PRH or, Macmillan, who are doing 5 or 6 months out, and you sound kinda sexy when you write like, "I'm booked through March, but my availability opens up in April," and there's people booked out for a year. I understand that, but I would ask myself, am I willing to, if Harper Audio calls me, could I burn the candle at both ends and squeeze it in? Because I just worry about your momentum
Right,
slowing down.
right.
But that's really like an up to you thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah.
don't know. I'm going to disagree with you.
Okay, how dare you?
Yes, I dare. I dare. I'm going to respectfully say I have a different point of view. That would be a better
Okay,
way of saying it.
okay.
I think that you should try to get your schedule when you schedule out so if someone calls and says, I got an 8 series, now maybe this is for the next time, you try to add an extra month. Can we push it one more month out so that there's just some wiggle room in there? And, and then if a book comes in from the right publisher in the right situation, you can say, yes, I can squeeze that in. And even if you can't, there's gigs as a young musician. It's like, if you pass it up, somebody else gets the gig. And if somebody else gets that gig, they may then get a bunch of other gigs. And they're just time as an artist that I don't want to get to the end of a series of gigs that I've got lined up. And then you've got nothing. And if you wait until, I mean, it's easier to get jobs when you have jobs. And that's this life in this business and almost everything else. And so, you know, as a performer, a guy who made his living working gig to gig, it's like sometimes you've got a 1 month gig where you're 4 or 5 nights a week, and then what did you do? You get a gig that pays more and is more prestigious and it's going to lead. You hit a sub for your first gig. In other words, we found a way to make it work and squeeze in those ones that are right. Now, you might slow down your reach outs just slightly,
Yeah, yeah.
but the reality is, instead of telling them you're booked, first off, they're not going to consider me for 80% of the stuff anyway.
Mhm.
So go out there, and then if they happen to come in, then you say, well, you know what? Between the time I, talk to you, we're really busy right now. And anyway, your
And we
goal,
call that a champagne problem.
yes, it is. It is.
Hello. A very,
Yes, it
very
is.
fancy problem. So, yeah.
But
So, and again, just that's the other thing to remember about auditioning too is, like, I don't know how many of you out there auditioned for the PRH, AHAB thing that they did. And they chose 3 it's something they're gonna do again, so everybody kinda keep an ear out, follow AHAB, on your Instagram and whatever. But they did a thing where they had 3, uh, genres and you could audition for 2 pieces, and I think they said they got 375 auditions,
wow.
and then they narrowed it down to the 3 for each, piece. But again, I think the key to it so, Melissa, the reason why I wouldn't wanna stop the audition process, like, even, like, wait till the don't borrow trouble, but every audition is also about an opportunity to be heard. So I didn't do those PRH things being like, "Oh my god, I'm totally gonna, for sure get picked," and that my self-worth is tied to that. I was like, "I want Lucas, Grace Barons, and I want Ashley Klubal to hear my work and maybe, kick it up or not." And as it turns out, the, nonfiction that I thought I did amazing at, they chose 3, older than middle-aged men, from what I understand, to read. So if that's what's kind of hitting the vibe, it wasn't my book, but they might say, "Wow, McCann's pretty she's a good got a good read on it." I don't know.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes you're doing an audition for a specific book, and what are the odds that you're going to get that? So if you audition for it, the odds are low. Unfortunately, that's just life in this business. And when they give you the offer, they're not bothered by somebody saying, "Wow, now I'm not. I'm just a little bit too busy. If we could do it." And sometimes in their schedule, if they're booking 6 months out, they can say, "Well, you know what? Instead of it being due in 8 weeks, we could do it in 12 weeks." Sometimes they have the wiggle room. Sometimes they don't. But you can ask them, "Wow, I'm really
Definitely.
right now, I have a couple things on my plate. Would 12 weeks, is that workable?" And find out. And sometimes it's yes, and sometimes it's no. But if it's no, you were still top of mind. You were still their first choice or a choice. And that also means because you were straight with them and didn't BS them and say, "Yes, I'll get it done," and then blow it and not get it done, you have an
They
opportunity to have a
respect that you're
relationship.
wanted.
Say
Yeah,
that again?
they respect that you're sought after. They respect that you're having to juggle. Those are the narrators that they wanna be working with.
Okay.
So, yeah, I agree with you on all that,
Oh,
for sure.
Melissa Benson. I'm not that young. My candle's melting fast, but good advice. Yes. Okay. Um, Miss CrossFit. Um, anyway, here's the thing. Some of us are aging faster than others. Okay. Some of us are are in the more mature end of this spectrum, but it's still a matter of use it or lose it. And auditioning is just an ongoing thing, and just don't ever stop. Too many people just
Yeah,
wait till the very end. Hey, I'm now a month out from when I'm going to be done with all these things. And so let's say you start auditioning in February, then that isn't necessarily enough time. It might be, but also almost everybody ends up with this cycle where it could take at that point 3 months to get another book, or it could take 3 weeks. You just don't know. So keep doing it is my thing. Now, any other comments on that? Oh, and so Bill Clinton, who I'm sure that's the official Bill Clinton. How will AI affect audiobooks? That's probably a topic we are constantly discussing. Um,
I'm gonna give you my big fat opinion
Go
because 'cause I'm
for it.
not on here every week like that handsome devil, Johnny Heller. Um, Somebody said to me once, "They came up with plastic flowers, and people buy plastic flowers and they love plastic flowers, but there's always gonna be a higher end customer that likes fresh roses." Um, I am not afraid about AI at all because, well, not at all. It's the lower hanging fruit. So the people who kind of read and sound like kind of one level. But again, it gets back to why coach with an acting coach. It's no AI is ever going to be able to get the sarcasm, the irony, the humor, the pathos, all of those things, those levels that make a book so interesting. They won't be able to, I always call it spoon feeding the listener so that they can just relax. It's acting in a way so that they get a fuller experience with it. So AI is never going to be able to do that. So as long as you're working on your craft and you're a great actor, I think you're going to be safe.
Yeah, and I told it came up at the conference last week. So if you were at the conference, you already heard this story. There's a young man, drum machines came in. It was
Oh yeah.
before even computerized stuff, and it did cost us some jobs at first because everybody in the mute, not everybody, the popular hits in the when I was a young guy, a lot of them were being produced with drum machines because that was a new thing. It was cool and it was and all the drummers were like, "Really?" But that's what it was. Now the funny thing is I have a bunch of peers. I ended up my family was growing. I ended up doing some other things. I have some peers that were exactly at my level, or they were a little ahead, a little behind. Today are world class players. They stayed through it, and because it's gone full cycle. While there was a period of time where that was cool and that's what people were doing, um, it's come all around. There's more work for drummers these days. It's crazy what you can do, and of course, the opportunities that are available. So the whole universe is expanding. AI will take some of the low-hanging fruit, guaranteed. It's going to do, hey, you've reached, Joe's Plumbing. Happy you're here. Press 1 for the toilets. Press 2 for the. I mean, that's going to be done by AI because you don't need an actor to do that.
2 things. Yeah, you're never going to be Dave Grohl with a, a machine. The other thing that's cracking me up is, and this is for all my newbies out there who are editing their stuff and like worrying about it. I don't know if anybody saw this, but I saw an AI and they're literally putting in where the AI is doing, and
Breath.
then they're talking about a, because they realize they're trying to make it sound more human,
Right.
and breathing is human.
Right.
So, I know, Dawn, you set up my Studio One, I love it, and you have my RX isotope, I love it, but, you told me not to get so precious about, worry about your performance and not your breaths, and then you can kind of smooth it out. I mean, make sure you're not gasping,
Right.
but, you can smooth it out in the long run. So I thought that was interesting that AI is putting it in as we're fighting to take it out.
Yeah, well, I do think it's primarily somebody younger in the business, mostly, who are taking out all their breaths. I also think that if now here's the flip side of it. If you decide that for medical reasons or health reasons that you pretend you decide you're going on a low salt diet, and so you take salt out of as many things as you can, after a while you become more sensitive to the taste of salt, and you don't need as much, but
Mhm.
you get used to food tasting the way it tastes without salt and that's fine, but your taste adjusts. And then what would be a normal amount of salt for the rest of the world, um, it says too seems too salty to you, so you would use less. If they taste your food, they would go, it's pretty bland. Okay.
Where are we going with salt?
Well, you can get used to no salt and just the way things taste that way, and it's fine. You can get used to no breaths,
Oh,
and so
okay.
you think it sounds fine, but then all the listeners out there kind of go, I don't really know why, but Maria sounds warmer, more personable than Don, who has all the breaths taken out.
Right.
And but that the problem is that some narrators, if they've taken them out for a while, they get used to the sound of it with no breaths, and they think it sounds quote better. But that'd be like taking all the salt out of food. I might think it tastes better, but the rest of the world would not be happy with that. Okay,
Got it.
so
You got there, Don
yeah, I
Baarns.
took
You got there,
that's like
baby.
4,000 words to say something in three. You leave your breaths in, but I don't want to sound like I have a medical condition in terms of breathing, but there is a difference there.
Okay, Chris Walsh has a question that yes, Chris, I almost said it and I almost busted in to say it. I am a huge believer. I cannot emphasize enough that you should what is it? Over deliver, under promise and over deliver. So yes, always. Look, Benson is a fantastic organized narrator. She was sick as a dog recently. I was sick. So I am so yes, always go as far as you think you can get away with. 2 months, whatever. I can whip out a book in a few days. I got to be, do a couple finished hours per day, so I can whip out a book in a week, but I would never tell the publisher or the, rights holder that I can do that. So, nobody's ever mad when you're like, "I finished your project 2 weeks early."
Yeah.
You're welcome. Although I will say, one of the newer things about working with the Big 5 and some of the other publishers, which is interesting to me, and it also shows about when you're, like, thinking you're ready for the big leagues versus are you ready for the big leagues, is, working with B Audio, who is, works for Harper a lot, so they're the production company. They want you to put in your, work every day so that they tell you they got in touch with me. I just got a great book for Harper, that I'm really excited about, but they were like, "Between October 3rd and October 8th, you will be recording your 10-hour book, and you will be putting in every day what you've done or whatever." That was the expectation. So, you're not doing your own editing, but if you do it with Dawn, that doesn't take that much time anyway, but so you need to get up to speed so that you'll be able to handle that, and that won't make scare you or whatever. I was a little disappointed because I loved this book and I would have liked to savor and cherish it a little bit more, but, these big fives, they're moving along and they're booking,
But
editors
but you know
as
why
to
they're
work
doing
as you
also
put it
some of
in.
that stuff?
What?
Because they know most people don't do a good job of organizing their schedule, and if they make you put in something every day, then somebody can't wait until the very end to go, "I'm gonna try to record 8 hours in a 2-day period," and, now, somebody could in advance, if they had the book in advance, they could record their first day 2 or 3 days in advance. They could be ahead of that schedule and just submit it on those days and
Yep.
do it. So, there are
If I'd had time, I would
yes.
have done it, but the retreat got
Yeah, of
in the
course.
way and whatever. They also scare you, which I don't know how you feel about this, Dawn, but, like, they're like, "And you better send 30 seconds of room tone every day because your room tone changes and leave the room," and all this stuff. So that was the other thing that scared me was I was like, "Oh god, I gotta do my finished hours and then do the room tone, and they'll know.
Yeah.
They'll know if I didn't." Like, is that true,
It's
or should
it
I
it's really so it's, okay, my hair changes every day. So what? Well, I mean, as a guy, because I'm not trying to change it. So, your room tone on a daily basis, if you have a reasonably good situation and it's set up the same every day. The problem they have is some people tear down and set up every day, and
Mm,
then things could be a little bit different. If you have a permanent space or a booth that you use to record in and it's always set up the same, your room tone should be the same virtually every day. Could you have an anomaly? Of course you could. I like to I throw samples into RX and I can spot at a glance that something is off if it ever were. But it changes so little, and the audience won't perceive it. It's just a matter of they want to make sure people are doing things. So sometimes they do it because in the past they've had people that their booth is changing every day,
mhm.
and because they're changing stuff. Unfortunately, so here's the a little pro tip type thing. Your setup should be as close to the same every possible day in terms of I'm the same distance from the mic. My mic is sitting in a certain spot. Everything should be set up in advance so that you can easily walk in and do the same thing without having to think about it. That should be the last thing you think about is your setup. And I have to one other little um, a little thing here. Craig here just did so he super chat
No,
actually sent
you
us
make me happy. You make
yeah
me happy.
yeah. But hey, this doesn't happen. First off, it's never required, but it's always appreciated, and we will go out and have a Starbucks together here because of this. Um, so thank you for
Did he
sending
give
ten
you 10
dollars.
bucks? I
Yeah,
love
he
it.
said ten
Thank you.
bucks.
God love you.
And anybody can do that. Thank you, Craig, for doing that. We do drink coffee, both of us, and we will on this one too as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you
I don't
very
come up very
much. Yeah.
often. Appreciate it. So when I started 9 years ago, knew nothing of coaches. I bragged at not a single breath in my audio. Yeah, listeners weren't pleased, but that's You know what? Sometimes listeners won't notice, sometimes they will. But guarantee over the long term, especially with AI, they are putting in breaths. They're starting to, and they will do that more. One of the big giveaways right now is there's no breaths in 90% of the AI that's out there. And they're still trying to figure it out. It's a very hard thing to do and have breaths be very organic. It's just a different process for them.
It was
Um,
interesting for me, Dawn, just recently to kind of realize they were talking about this at the retreat as well, is like you still have to have a brain doing the book and kind of guiding the AI. So I don't even know, like I thought that they would just throw that in there and it figures it all out.
well,
But it seems like it might be more complicated, which leads me to believe again that it may be something that some people use if they don't care. Like a
right,
Penguin Random House or whatever is always going to care about serving the author, which
right,
is that's the other thing we have to keep in mind. That's another one of my big things is like we worry about our performances and it's not about our performances, it's about serving the author and the author's intent, and if you can do that, fulfill that, that's fine. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting that they can't just throw it in there and it goes.
and that's the same with the drum stuff. Also, they figured out over time that it was as much work to have the computers do it. Now, some of the modern stuff that's going on, there are times where the single composer will take over a whole orchestra. Before, what you needed a whole orchestra, some guy or gal sitting in front of their keyboard, and she's just playing all the parts on her keyboard, and it works just fine, and it can sound great.
It
But
depends on the sound.
the
Yeah,
whole universe has expanded. So there still are more opportunities for live musicians to perform today than there ever have been, and more opportunities for them to earn revenue than there ever have been in the
yeah,
past. But it's not the same as what it was. The whole universe has expanded. So both are coexisting and doing great.
and
So,
everybody's surviving. Emily, Kate Flaherty. Congratulations, on that. I gotta admit, I was a little bit like, "What?" Because 'cause you're new. Private message me. I'll do you a solid. Let's have me just run through it with you and coach. Again, it's not about I just helped, a fantastic actor who was like, "I audition well. I audition well." I'm like, "I'm not saying you don't audition well. You're talented. But, if you want to, for confidence sake, Kate, I'll work with you on that audition so you feel
and
like you got some swagger."
that's a perfect opportunity to make
For
sure
free.
that I let you know. We have a course, Maria. We did a 3-hour webinar on winning auditions, and Maria worked with now 5 people for about 30 minutes each, 25 minutes each, going through scripts and helping them make the most of an audition. And so that's part of a little super bundle we have on our VO Jumpstart site. And we've got a bundle that includes Heller doing 3 hours, and Maria doing 3 hours, and Donnie Baarns doing 3 hours. And you can get a bundle here and save some money. So check that out at vojumpstart.com. There's my little advertisement for the day. Um, and so, just so you know, I mean, we did a 3-hour webinar with Maria on Audition. And if you haven't seen it, you'll be pretty shocked. It's very, very well done. And here, no secret, I like this gal, but I I like this gal because first off, I've been a performer my whole life. I've been around world-class musicians my whole life. And after a while, when I'm in my 60s, it doesn't take very long for me to figure out, oh, that person is a performer, and they're one of the people that doesn't just have one little kind of talent that's just so hyper focused. And then it's rare to find people that can explain it if they do it really well themselves. And we've all seen this. A basketball player buys a basketball team after he or she retires, and then they try to coach others, and they're terrible at it because they're so good at it. They think everyone can do what they did, and they put in tens of thousands of hours and all sorts of other details. One of Maria's strengths is not only can she do it for herself from all this experience being around Hollywood and here in one of the entertainment capitals of the world for so many decades, but she also can explain it to others and help them become good at it. And that's a secondary art that I don't always run into that. I run into one or the other. And I've also run into some coaches that never could get an acting gig, but they're great at coaching others, but they have to have some background that served them to make that work. Comments?
I say coaching is a calling for me. Like, it gives me energy, it brings me joy. So, yeah, it's been something that,
Oh,
I love to do.
and Colette says here, I've done a coaching session. Her passion is contagious. Yeah, 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 yeah. And then she knows how to teach constructively. It's fabulous. So I'll leave that. I mean, yeah,
Alright, enough,
yeah, yeah,
alright.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
get some value. What are
Yeah,
we gonna
correct.
talk about now?
So, so where do you see things going here over the next year? Do you have any ideas? First, oh, let me ask you one other thing before I get to that. Um, this is
And I
not the
wanna maybe go back to the retreat just a bit, but I don't
yeah.
know.
Anything
Maybe we've
anything else
already
that you found interesting at the retreat that you can think of? Um,
yeah, okay, I'm ready. I just wanna say that there's a lot of different, they call them retreats out there, but I will go to the Johnny Heller retreat every year. It's my daughter calls it Comic-Con for audiobook nerds. It's just so it's truly restorative, and, it was funny because Johnny in the opening speech was saying, You're gonna make lifelong friends," and there was a first-timer there who was like God, when he said that, I rolled my eyes and thought, "Yeah, okay, buddy, that sure." And after the days there, he was like, he was right. He is correct. So there's something about, um, being surrounded by your peers in a relaxed environment. I came home and I'm like, "Dishes? Don't you know who I am? Like, I have to do laundry?" So it really is a beautiful getaway, and there is learning, but there's also just it's like a destination wedding.
yeah.
It's so much fun, so much warmth. We really have a wonderful community of really interesting, intelligent people, but look, we like to talk to ourselves in closets, we and we're readers from way back. So, that was another big takeaway for me as well.
And here's something, but I want to go back to something you said earlier. Can you tell us more? You mentioned in passing earlier in this conversation about an accountability partner.
Yeah.
Why do you, after all these decades of acting and coaching, have an accountability partner? Can't you do it? I mean, what's wrong with you?
And let me say I have 2 accountability partners, and the
Okay.
one, is a really respected director, and she was wanting to, but I didn't, like, finish the brag. I bullied her into letting me, coach her, and then she got her first book from an audition she never had before. And then I have another one who's like, "I'm doing voiceover or whatever," but I'm so single-minded that she just got a book on the Dreamscape portal, and she got a 9-book series, like, whatever. So accountability partners are to keep you on track. It's tough. It's a tough business. You have to have resilience and grit. And a lot of times it's just accountability. It's in the name. So I would like to be doing 10 reach outs a week. And Jennifer Gillaraya has a wonderful class that she teaches where it's like, uh, you put the producers into like every week, and then what is mostly suggested is every quarter you mail to them. So if you set that up, but it's hard to kind of keep your own feet to the fire with all of it.
Yeah.
So it's nice to on some weeks get 5 out and be like, "Oh," and have somebody go, "Yeah, you didn't get 10, but you go, girl. I didn't do any," or whatever it happens to be. So it's also wonderful sharing of information. So I came back from the retreat with my one accountability partner. I went over all the what I learned about the producers, and so it's a back and forth sharing of information, and it's about having somebody also who is rooting for you in your corner. Um, so I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and I just think everybody needs it in one form or another. I listen. I had the same thing with exercising. If it wasn't for my neighbor and I walking every day for a couple years, and then there were some days where I'm like, I don't feel like walking. I don't feel like working out, and he would just be like, get off your. Well, he would swear, get off your rear end and let's go. And sometimes he didn't feel like it, and I would go and pester him as well, and we would just pester each other just a little bit. And because I also had someone who was expecting me to meet at some point, I would do it. I didn't feel like getting up some mornings. I didn't feel like doing something in the evening. He's like, come on. having somebody else who is helping you monitor what you want to do and telling them what you intend to do and then telling them how much you did it or didn't do it. Sometimes it goes both ways. It doesn't mean I would just, even if you have them, it doesn't mean it always.
And we take for granted what we do well. So with my accountability partner, I'm like, let's look at the text. And she's like helped me so much with researching and using different sites and whatever. So what comes easy for us isn't always easy for the other person. Like if I was Melissa's, I'd be like, I'm sitting this way and can you help me with this? Or I don't have a good vocal warm up or whatever it happened to be. Um, so just be sure though you find somebody who lifts your spirit and you feel like gets you. But yeah.
Let's see. So I got to block this user. There we go. Oh, yeah.
Saudi Arabia?
Yes.
Really? Ooh,
By the
no.
way, so when people are in here, they he just got blocked. So
Okay,
anyway,
that's good.
it's
So
good.
that was it, and, like, there's people on this call, Amber, Steve, like, Amber is, like, such a dear friend just from online, and just to, really connect and know her story, like, I'm a richer person for it, so, again, I think all these things matter. When I went to APAC the first time,
Hmm.
I was so upset, it's really hard starting out. It's
Yeah,
hard to have bravery and go
yeah.
to these things and feel like, you're new, but the more you go, the more people are there to make these, experiences so much better. So
And it still comes down to doing that. So if anyone goes to one of them and thinks that that's going to be a big win, it can be, and it is a great starting point. But it's really the people that show up and that one, and then they see you someplace else, and they see you
and the
online, and they see
reach
you.
outs, the
Yes,
follow-up.
it's the follow-ups. One encounter with almost anybody, and especially if you're talking to people who talk to a lot of people, and every one of those publishers, and Maria is going to talk to 100 people over the next 2 months. So if you ran into her at one event, she may remember you, but if she sees you at two or three events and you guys talk, yeah, you have cats, don't you? Yes, yes, I do. I love cats, or I hate cats,
Well,
or
and I had people come up and say, "I took your class and da da da," and I'm like, "Oh," or I had one of the people, Joan Corvino was, "I know you from online. Can I have a hug?" I will never forget her. I love her forever now.
yeah,
So, it is. It makes it all real.
yep, yep.
So,
It's very good. So anything as we close up here, anything you can think of that you want to promote other than everybody, I'll promote for her. Everyone knows you can contact Maria for coaching on auditions and acting and some great stuff. She's one of my favorite people. And I recommend a few people in this business. I have maybe a dozen
I
people
do
that I
too.
recommend for different things.
Yeah.
And you're one of them. But here's the funny thing that some people know and some people don't. I always ask the person that I've recommended somebody to. So let's say I recommended Maria to Bob. I'll go back to Bob in 2 months and go, hey, what's your experience been like with Maria? And she gets fabulous reviews. Like if this were Yelp, she'd be like 5 stars. I want to do her. I want to do it again. That kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing I'm always following up because I don't do the lesson. So I recommend her. I do want to follow up and find out the results. And those are the people that I continue to recommend because you don't want to recommend somebody and have people have bad experience. That reflects poorly on me. It'd be the same for her. So Maria's the same thing. And she makes great contacts and she can help you also with, I mean, I don't think you
Yeah, the
think
business side.
the
Yeah.
business side, yeah, because she gets the fact, hey, you need to be looking at these publishers and you need to be looking at this, and this is how you need to build some things. So it's fabulous. Anything else you want to promote?
I do wanna say one
Hmm.
thing, I've always said that as actors, we have our own toolbox. So it'll be Steve Corona, School of Acting, and you get something from Joel Frumpkin, from Johnny Heller, from Maria McCann, from Carol Monda. Certain things hit at certain times, and there's a lot of really talented coaches out there. If anybody says that they've got all the answers, I would be very concerned. There's one coach out there who's like, "This is the way it is, and
Yeah.
it's only this way," and you just go, "Whoa." But I think it's really healthy to take with Joanna Parent, to take with these different people and decide what resonates with you,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, and yeah,
I'll just say, my mentor, I worked with him as a young guy, like 15 to the time I was 20, and he always said, You really need to find 3 mentors because, no one person is gonna be I've studied with this guy that's world class, and he's like, "But you also have to find a couple more because you need multiple points of view to be your own artist and to be great at this thing," and he was totally right. And I probably went through 10 before I found my 3 that I stuck with over multiple years and a very long time. And so it is amazing what happens when you find your first one and then over time spend some time with that first one. So work with Maria for a while, and then after you've done worked with her for a while, then you find your other one. And you may have to, unfortunately, work with 2 or 3,
Kiss
and
the
sometimes,
frogs.
yeah, but sometimes it worked out that I would work with somebody and I would learn what I don't wanna do, and that's
Yes.
okay. That's just as valuable as finding the ones that you want to work with. So same for everybody else. Any final words there, Maria, before I close this out?
I love our community. Thanks to all my friends who listened in, and, I wish I could have heard you back. But and thank you, Don, for asking me to be here.
Yeah,
Johnny's such a heavy hitter. He's just PRH. I mean,
I
so,
but we're
anyway, thank
we're
you for
really
asking me
happy
to
that you
be
were with
here.
us, and Johnny will be back next week if he should have this book finished this week. But anyway, every once in a while it comes up that the publisher says, "No, hey, we need you this week," and he'll get a last minute change. We go on anyway, but Johnny will be back next week. And as always, we look forward to seeing you on the wires. And thank you for the nice contribution out there. Talk to you later,
Thanks,
Craig.
Mac. Hi, Max.
Bye bye.
Hi, Sheree. Hi, Barbara.